All right, we're back. Sorry about that. Looks like we lost a little bit of the feed there. So what'll end up happening is we'll get this like circle of death thing going, and then it blows everything completely out of the water on the feed. So looks like we're back. Sorry about that. Um, so no, we were talking about basically some of the do's and don'ts about what works and what doesn't work with the Hellcat. And I briefly touched on basically the Kobe's back end with the arm flex. There he is. Talking about what works, what doesn't work, suspension mods. We didn't even get into springs yet. So don't let me forget about that. We were just talking about boost when the feed got kind of weird. And for you guys that are just coming in, a lot of times what happens on my end is I'll have this circle of death thing that'll just start spinning, and sometimes it'll kick out. It'll just go away, and other times it doesn't. And that time it just stayed on and on and on. It looks like the feed was dead. So anyway, we are back and up and running. At least that's what it looks like on my end. So getting back into the boost, ET's asking, is your Fox an 89? Yes, it is. And Kobe Warren saying, thank you for the info about my car being heat soaked the other day. Not a problem. So getting into the boost thing though, so we talked about you can add a little bit of boost. Realistically, again, about 100 horsepower to maybe 110, 120 horsepower gain is about the most that I want to see with the Hellcat on 93 octane. I know a lot of guys will cheat that up a little bit with Boostane or Torco or something like that. For me personally, I don't like being shackled to a fuel additive. Not to mention, if there's ever something kind of not right with your fuel additive, then, there could be a problem there. Just in terms of, again, we get into the fuel quality issue again. So it's kind of weird the way that it works out. You'll hear me talk about fuel quality a lot when it comes to these Hellcats. And again, you've got to take into consideration the weight of the vehicle, the way that this engine makes boost, and the fact that you've got so much weight and so much inertia to overcome that you've got these real high dwell times, real high cylinder pressures, in other words, for typically longer than you would with other platforms at any given load. Okay, that's really what we're looking at, which would, of course, lead to more knock. So when do you go E85? This is the big question. And one thing that I want to lean on here is that there is no flex fuel for these cars. I know a lot of folks have said, well, this works or that works or this works. Guys, I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen a flex fuel system that works reliably yet. Now, it's not to say that there's not one out there that I haven't heard about. It's completely possible. But I will tell you that I haven't seen it yet. Where that system was getting a lot of traction, a lot of pub, would have been with the Trackhawk guys. There was a company, remain nameless, that had put out there that they had cracked the flex fuel code for these Mopars. And every single one of them that came to the shop had some kind of a problem that had gone to that particular company. So I can only tell you from my own experience what I've seen, and as of Thanksgiving 2020, I haven't seen a system that has worked reliably yet. So with all that being said, you are now going to be dedicated to an E85 setup. The problem with that is you've now basically bought yourself the luxury of testing E85 every time you put it into your vehicle. Now, a lot of guys do this just out of force of habit. I would suggest doing it out of what I've seen happen with E85 cars. Again, I'm not trying to scare you away from this. I'm trying to scare you into, if you have the gumption to go upper lower pulley injectors and go big power on E85, you're going to need to be scared into testing your E85, because this has happened to me not once, not twice, but at least 3 times. I've been a party to a bad tank of E85. Let me just tell you a story real quick. Happened to me on the dyno once. No, I'm sorry, 4 times. It happened to me on the dyno twice. I was basically finishing up a tune on a car, and it was more or less just checking fuel trims, making sure everything was cool with the car. Strangely enough, I'm looking at my short-term fuel trims and they don't look that great. This thing's starting to add fuel, or pull fuel, I should say, like you wouldn't believe. And I'm going, dude, this doesn't look right. This is like really, really bad. And so that was the first time it had ever really happened. And it was pretty obvious. You get out of the car and like waft the exhaust, try to get a sense of the smell, because good E85 is real easy to identify. The fuel itself smells like old dirty gym socks, and there's just a smell that is associated with E85, and it was not there for that car. The second time that this had happened, very similar situation, but it happened with the car on the dyno. And this was a deal where I'm sitting there looking at the car, looking at the computer, looking out the front of the car, got everything already set up, everything's ready to go. And I happen to look at my computer screen and I'm rolling into the throttle. And when you got a car on the dyno, especially if you're doing a tune or updating a tune or what have you, you're looking at about 1,000 things. You're trying to look at 1,000 things at the same time. And there's a little bit of an assumption that comes along with this. And that is that you can't see everything. I can't see AFR. I can't see short-term knock retard. I can't see fuel injector duty cycle. I can't see all of those things at once. But I have to assume that, well, if my fuel quality is good, my injector duty cycle shouldn't really freak out, assuming everything has been properly put together. Fuel injector duty cycle shouldn't freak out. Knock sensors really shouldn't go nuts, but you're looking at these parameters. I go watt with the car, and about a second into the pull, and I'm looking, AFR looks decent. Everything's kind of checking out. I look down, knock sensors, I'm looking right at the voltage, and it's like 2.25, jump right out of the throttle immediately. It's like reflex action. So, basically this was an E85 car that again had a bad tank at E85, and then of course Quick Brick had his issues when he came down here with his NA car that basically didn't run right because it again had a bad tank at E85. I can go on and on about this, which I kind of already have gone on and on. Anyway, long story short, you got to test your E85 because E85 isn't E85, guys. This is the other thing. E85 has a range from E70 to E90, okay? That is the basic MEA spec for E85 gasoline, or E85 fuel, I should say, because it's not gasoline, it's a fuel. The reason why that is important to understand is because if your car is tuned, and let's say you tuned it with a very hot tank of gas. This thing was E90. It is cream of the crop. Stuff is like mother's milk in your gas tank. And you get that thing tuned and it is set on kill on this tank of gas that is basically E90. And then somehow or another, you get a bad tank of E70 or worse. In this case, the cases that I'm talking about, it was even worse than E70, I'm sure. It didn't check it, but yeah, it was pretty bad. And again, we're relying on the people that own the car, bringing the car to us full tank of E85. We're assuming that this stuff is good. Well, that's kind of the equivalent difference in octane, you know, from like 114 down to like 97 or something like that. It's not a very good spread. So you want to make sure, again, that if you are going to go E85, that you get in the habit of testing your fuel. What's the legitimate limit to that? Well, nobody's really found it yet. E85 will support all the power that you would ever want to throw at this car. Again, it's just going to get into fuel systems now and really diving into some things that you probably may not want to even consider unless you're just going to build an outright race car. a pair of, but you're going to have to, if you have a Hellcat, you're going to have to buy dual pumps, injected engineering set of pumps, and the injectors, and basically everything that it's going to take to make your car work on E85 alone. But you can do that. Now, what about for the lower boost guys? Is there a benefit? Well, kind of. Just not as much of a benefit as you would have as if you were making more boost. The more boost you run, the more you're going to get a benefit out of E85. On a stock car, if you're only running the thing around on the street, I really wouldn't recommend it unless you are just dying to have a car that runs on E85. It just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to do that. Again, with one other, maybe a caveat to that, if you live in an area that has 91 octane, but you've got great access to E85, in that respect, it may be a good option for you. But again, you're buying a lot of parts just to run that one fuel. And the difference at that point would be pretty significant in the way the car runs, though. But 93 octane versus E85 in a street car, at a fairly low altitude, say 1,000 feet above sea level, you're not going to see that much of a difference realistically. I mean, on the drag strip, yeah, you might see a couple of tenths at the most, but that would just be the benefit of running a significant amount more timing than when you're able to run on 93 octane. But again, if you're just driving the thing on the street and it's a street car, probably not all that recommended. So there's your chat on boost. Now, what about, and this is the one that always comes up, what about the Incognito? What about the Hellraiser? What about the products that have been marketed to not need a tune? Guys, there is absolutely no such thing as a pulley that doesn't require a tune for a multitude of reasons. Now, I will concede the fact that within the tune, there's enough overhead if you live in very high altitude conditions. You live in, everybody knows about Colorado, Denver, whatever. If you live in Denver where you're 5,000 feet above sea level, that's one thing. Okay, then yes, you're never getting into the lower portions of your airflow tables anyway. You're at too high of an altitude. Then yes, that pulley will work in that specific, very unique condition. But if you are not living in those specific unique conditions and you live at sea level, or say up to maybe 1,500 feet physically above sea level, I wouldn't recommend that pulley, because during the wintertime when the DAs start to drop, you start running into DAs that are like 0, you're going to be running outside of the parameters of what that tune can actually manage. I don't suggest doing that at all. As a matter of fact, Dr. Differentials tried this with the Hellraiser pulley. I saw a guy at the drag strip just a couple of trips ago that just, man, I got to be honest with you, I think he might have stung his car. And of course, he's being told, oh, you can run this pulley, no problem. Guys, this is a Hellcat that may have run a 1090 at like 123 miles an hour on a tire. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that something wasn't going right. The thing was probably pulling all kinds of timing at the top end, and he's gone into cat overtemp way early. There's all these things that were happening, I'm sure, to his car that would not have been happening had he been running the right fuel injector, because it was probably pinned as far as injector duty cycle. NOx sensors were going absolutely crazy, I'm sure of it, for good reason. And his airflow was probably just off the charts. And again, these are the things that you run into when you try to run one of those pulleys without a tune. I'll even take that step further. Okay, so we had a customer bring in this is a different car, but it still falls in lockstep with what we're talking about here. Had a customer bring a car in. It was a ZL1, and gorgeous car, put a pulley on it, and was told by whoever the shop was that put the pulley on the car, no, you don't have to put a tune on the car. It's all right, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be cool. That car blew up, and it wasn't very cool because it was a complete disaster flick. Here it is. You've got this gorgeous, practically brand new ZL1 with a blown up engine because the guy was told he could run a pulley on this thing and the stock tune would be more than capable of managing it. It didn't work out that way, and the guy ended up having to replace the entire engine. Not a good thing. So again, when you hear about guys that are saying, well, no, you don't need a tune or whatever for this pulley or that pulley, just know that in very specific circumstances, and I mean very specific circumstances, that statement is true. But if you are at the other circumstances, if you're at lower altitudes, that statement is untrue and you're basically playing with fire and it's not going to go well. You're going to have a bad time. So anyway, let me check in with you guys and then I will get back to some other do's and don'ts with these Hellcats. Let's see. ET Race saying, I have 389s. Love them, dude. Love me my little Foxy here. Super Luigi saying, nice beard, bro. Thanks. Appreciate it. It will be leaving here pretty soon, though. So I like it makes me look ancient. Let's see. Queasy's saying, because I am. Queasy's saying, the other day my car started slowing down even when I was on the gas. Luckily, I was able to turn it to a gas station. Steering got really tight, too. Battery light came on, but no overheating. Engine was okay. Turn it off for a minute. Then after it went back to normal, what could that be? My drive belt wasn't broken either. Well, let's try to unpack that. Say it started slowing down even when I was on the gas. Sounds like it was a throttle body issue. I would check and see if you have any stored codes, but it almost seems like it was a throttle body losing connectivity issue. If it was, in other words, if it just, you're on the throttle and nothing was happening, it could have been that. I doubt that it would have been a fuel pump, but you should have some stored codes floating around in there somewhere for that. Let's see. Slimecoot is asking about the full performance flex tune from Dusterhoff. No, I haven't. I haven't heard anybody talk about that. And I'll take this a step further. Not only have I not heard anybody talking about that, but I know that HP Tuners has been working to try to get all of the parameters and everything set up for actual flex fuel for these cars. There are in the beta version, and I think it's not only in the beta version, but it's also in the in just the regular version of HP Tuners. I run beta on all of mine, but I want to say that there is a provision to run flex fuel. It's like it's there, but it's just not perfected yet. And they've got to incorporate and mix in other bits and pieces from other operating systems to make it work. I will say this though, that to do it right, to really do it right, you need to do it the way that General Motors does, with a sensor that senses ethanol content. The problem with trying to make one of these cars work with a flex fuel system is that the way that it detects what fuel quality is in the car is through the NOx sensors, basically. It's the way that the Demon can tell you if it's got 93 octane or race gas in it. Here's the problem. When you tune one of these Mopars, the NOx sensors are unimaginably sensitive. Like, they are way oversensitive with these cars. One of the reasons why you get so much false knock out of these things. Well, the system uses the NOx sensor to tell you, or to determine whether or not you've put E85 in the car or not. So you can kind of see how this problem starts to manifest. If you numb the NOx sensors, it's never going to think that it's got regular gas in it. It's just going to think that it's got E85 in this case, or race gas in the case of the Demon, in it all the time. And that's going to be a bit of a problem, because when you put in the regular fuel, it's still going to be and when I say regular, I mean 93 octane gasoline. When you put in the gasoline instead of race fuel or E85, it's never going to pull the timing until you go into real knock, and the knock sensors start getting into like the 2 volt, 2.25 volt, 2.5 volt range, and it's going, damn, this is no good. And so it's yanking every bit of timing out. It's going to basically make your knock sensor portion of the tune to think that your nanny is going to get real schizophrenic, because it's going to go from either trying to throw all the timing in the world at it to trying to yank all the timing out of nowhere because the fuel isn't right. And that's part of the problem with the flex fuel conundrum with the Mopars. It doesn't run off of a system that is actively monitoring, and without that active monitoring, just going off the knock sensors, if you left the knock sensors alone, it would be okay, I suppose, and you probably wouldn't run into any real knock based on known timing values. But it's still the idea that you still run into the false knock and you end up pulling like 2 or 3 degrees of timing for seemingly no reason. And I know this just because I've data logged my work truck and it's pulled 3 degrees of timing cruising down the road at 65 miles an hour. So yeah, you tell me how sensitive those knock sensors are. Jamie's asking, can the quality of 93 octane be checked like E85? Unfortunately, no, not the way that E85 can be checked. Let's see. Alex is checking in saying hi. Hello, Alex. Luis is asking, oh yeah, I'm going to get to you guys right now and then I'll get to keep going with some of the Hellcat stuff. Luis is asking, what camshaft do you recommend for the 392? Also, do you know about and sleeper cams, quiet but strong? My sniper cam is one of the cams that does incredibly well in that it just doesn't really lope. It doesn't have much of a lope, but you're looking at a solid 30 to 40 horsepower gain minimum. Really good setup, good strong performer. I know that Quick Brick likes his, and his on a dyno jet made just shy of 500 horsepower to the rear wheels. Of course, it's got all the mods to go along with that. Long tubes, also an E85 car, but the main thing is that cam is going to produce a lot of power over a very broad range. So it's not going to make a peak number, but it'll make power basically from the hit all the way through. Let's see. Let's see. Bear with me just 1 second, guys. Oop, come on, work for me here. All right, let's see. Dang it. Got this Band-Aid on my finger. So I took a chunk out of my finger. Let's see. All right. Mike G saying, snow's right around the corner up here in Washington State. I'm wondering how small a wheel I can fit on my 2019 Challenger RT so I can start shopping for snow tires. Not sure. Probably a 6-inch width, I would guess. Why is this not doing what I'm telling it to do? Oh, well. All right. Let's see. Oh, Kobe's saying super stocks are hitting the dealer floors. So, yeah, and there's not that many of them, too. I think that they capped out at like 200, which is kind of funny to me in a way because, you know, the super stock is basically just Demon Light. And so let's talk about that for a minute, the super stock and how it kind of plays into all of this. So the super stock, you can think of it like this. You know, we've talked about boost. We've talked about suspension a little bit. Basically, it's got Demon springs. The Carlisle Demon Killer springs or whatever, basically the same thing. You know, if you're really going for outright quarter-mile performance, would they work out better than the regular springs? Man, I don't know. If you're really up there in terms of power and you need to plant the car, yeah, I would say that it might help you a little bit. But for most guys, you know, that are going to be in the, you know, at the fastest, maybe a 950, 970, it's really not going to do you a whole lot of good to run those springs. I'd say that's probably about the time. If you get the car into like the high 9s, that would be about where that spring might start to help you a little bit, just in terms of keeping that rear tire planted. But realistically, no, not really. But the super stock. So Man, I got to tell you something. The super stock kind of intrigues me a little bit because, well, it's a red eye. It's really all it is. It's a trim for the red eye. You've got, well, basically, you've got a red eye with a set of springs and a wide body kit, and that's kind of it in a way. And what's funny to me about the super stock is that it's a wide body. The funny thing, the reason why I say it's funny is that super stock back in the day, a true super stock class car was typically a factory effort. It was a car that the factory would give to offer guys that were in this class called super stock. And what it was the lightest weight version of the car that they had. They would use the smallest seats and the zero option cars and the biggest engine that they had in the cheapest, most stripped version of a car that they had with the rear end and the transmission to manage the power. And that was basically it. It existed specifically to outrun the competition, or at least try to outrun the competition. So in that respect, a super stock to me would be a narrow body, not a wide body. It would not have, I mean, oh, and by the way, the super stock does have, my understanding of it anyway, is that it does have the smaller Demon brakes. And if that's the case, that's pretty cool. But again, you know, why you got the weight savings on one end, but you've got the killing of the aerodynamics with that wide body kit on the other. It just kind of makes me like, what? But anyway, I'll be interested to see how those cars actually run in real life. But you know, what's funny is that Dodge, I want to say, what did Dodge say that car would run? Like 1070s or something like that? Or 1050. I think it was 1050. And the reason why I say that number is kind of funny is that Revlon with a stock gear and an unlocked computer went 1065, I think is what it went. Anyway, before the gear went in the car. And that was the reason why I say it's kind of funny is because talk about learning from a past mistake. I guarantee you, if that car is set up properly, it's going to go quicker than a 1050. Only because there are some red eyes that have already gone quicker than 1050 in that form of stock. So when I say form of stock, we're talking tires and things like that have been swapped out, but just not necessarily as delivered. But anyway, you get into super stock. That's just kind of a funny thing to me because it's not really quite in lockstep. I'm sorry, super stock. Super stock. I almost thought I said super sport because I have made that mistake on a few occasions. Anyway, it's just weird when you start talking about the specifics of calling that car a super stock, especially in light of all the marketing that Dodge harkens back to the 60s era, drag racing, tire smoke, rock and roll, and all that, which is fantastic. But this is not walking with the history that they keep trying to harken back to. So I don't know. Maybe it's just a reimagining. We'll just call it that because reimagining seems to be the new way to, you know, call out a lie or bullshit or whatever. So anyway, let's see. Oh yeah, Colby's saying 1050s. Mike G saying, I might be alone in this, but I can't stand the way that wide-body Challengers look. So let me just say this, man. Mike, you and I were like this for a long time. I was not a wide-body Challenger guy for the longest time until I saw one in actually it was the demon that I was stuck with, the one I was stuck with for like 4 weeks. The car grew on me, but I will say this, it looks to me, the wide body Hellcat, I don't dislike it. It just looks a little contrived. And what I mean by that is that it looks like it's just trying too hard to be something. that it's maybe not. But I'll tell you what, though, that wide body Charger makes sense to me. In my brain, the wide body Charger looks so good because it doesn't try to, it's not a throwback style. So I don't know. To me, it's a modern car. It's got the wide body look. It's got the right stance. It's got a modern look to it. So to me, it just kind of goes well together. I don't know. But I can't say that I disagree with you because I'm sometimes really not in love with the wide body Challenger, but there are some wide body Challengers that I love. You know, it's weird. It'll be one of them just kind of catch my eye in just the right angle. I'm thinking, damn, that does look good. But then I see it in another angle. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm so used to the more traditional styling. Kobe's saying, I think Dodge underrates all of the cars. You know, I don't know that they underrate the cars, but I will say that there are some that do tend to perform a little bit better than advertised. The Hellcat is certainly one of them. I don't think that the Red Eye is necessarily underrated. I think that the Hellcat might be a little bit underrated by, you know, kind of that metric, but I don't think that the Red Eye is. But I do like driving Red Eyes. They're very punchy down low. A lot of fun. I don't know if they're 800 horsepower, but they are fun to drive. Let's see. Kevin's asking, hey Mason, with the eForce kit, their site shows an estimated 471 rear wheel horsepower and 475 rear wheel torque. And I remember you mentioning, mentioning it more like 415, 420. My question is, are these numbers based on having bolt-ons? Possibly, but if we're talking about an eForce kit on a, well, right now we're talking about eForce on a 5.7, I'm assuming. And yeah, so that is basically the difference between how a very friendly DynoJet dyno will read versus what a very stingy Mustang dyno will read. Typically, you're looking at about 10%, and you're not that far off. I mean, you know, you're talking 471, you know, take 10% out of that. That's going to get you fairly close to that 415, 420 number. So, you know, I would say that that's absolutely not without merit. That's definitely on point with what I would expect to see. And the main reason why I say that is because it's not uncommon for a hot rodded 392 to easily put down 467, 460-ish to the rear wheels. And again, an eForce prepped 5.7 will make just a little bit more power than a 392 will typically make. So just kind of food for thought on that one. So getting back to the Hellcat stuff. So we've talked about the rear end. We've talked about the drive shaft. We talked about the diff brakes. We talked about suspension stuff. We've talked about boost. So again, you know, when we're talking about all this, we talked about exhaust also. What I'm hoping is that by having this conversation, I can steer maybe some new Hellcat owners in the right direction. And if nothing else, my thing is this: you've got to stick to the recipe. Where guys, and this goes for 392s and 5.7s and even the 3.6, you've got to stick to the recipe when it comes to these Mopars, because to go outside of the recipe is you're getting close to potentially, well, ruining the car. And the reason why I say that is the cars are heavy. They have unique tuning needs here. And this is the other thing, is a tune. Because we haven't even talked about a tune. We've talked about things that require tunes, but we really haven't talked about a tune. So let's go ahead and get into the tuning part of it, because this can actually end up taking more time than anything else to walk through and to really navigate. Okay. So when you're talking about tuning a stock Hellcat, what should you expect to get for your time and efforts? Well, the main thing is going to be in the transmission tune more than anything else. That's where all of my gains have been with Little Miss Revlon. In fact, I was able to get this car pretty deep into the tens before I put the gear in it and started doing anything else with the car. But the big gains are going to be in transmission tuning. In terms of power, on a Mustang dyno, and again, this is a dyno at Pipes Performance, which is known to be stingy. And when I say stingy, this thing is like not just a heartbreaker, but there's folks that have called it a liar, just because they've seen higher numbers elsewhere. Here's the thing, guys. 40 horsepower ish, maybe, depending on conditions. This is a situation where, a corrected number doesn't necessarily tell the tale. If you're dynoing the car and it's hot, the car is heat soaked, it's getting into its hot spark tables, it's not throwing a lot of timing at the car, it's going to show a real low number, and then you let the car sit for a little bit, do all the tuning to it, and then make a freaking hero pass when the car is ice cold. Yeah, you're going to see significant differences from, when you bring the car in to after tuning. But a real number, not including a cool down hit, maybe 30 horsepower-ish. And again, this is for 93 octane. You're just not going to see a whole lot come of it. But again, most of your power is going to come from that transmission tuning. You might ask, well, why am I not getting all this power? The reason why is because if you're being, quite frankly, if you're being responsible with the car, you're not going to want to throw a ton of timing at it, because it's just not going to gain a whole lot of power by throwing timing at it. These cars love fuel. Timing is just something that they just don't latch onto very well. A perfect example of that, again, is Revlon. Revlon, I couldn't get this thing to even pick up 3 horsepower by throwing timing at it when it was on the dyno. But I threw fuel at it, and the car goes, hey, I like that. And so it was one of those weird things where I just kind of let everything fall into place on the dyno, and then I didn't think anything of it. I took the car to the drag strip, and the only time, in fact, I left everything stopped. That was the kind of the joke of the day, is that I made power just by throwing fuel at it. What was the point of even giving it any timing? It wasn't reacting to timing, at least not at that temperature. And so the idea was, it was kind of hot, trying to throw timing at it. It just, things weren't going that great. Now I take the car to the drag strip. This is the other side of it, is you have dyno and then drag strip validation. Took the car to the drag strip, and when the DA drops, I wasn't taking timing away. I just wasn't adding any real amount of timing. Well, when the DA drops and your air charge gets greater, the car pulls timing because it's got more air that it's working with. Basically, it's like getting more boost. So in the stock tune, as your air charge goes up, your timing comes down. And that's where it makes a difference. And that's where adding timing allows you to maintain power. And that's more or less kind of the idea. You're still keeping the same timing values. You're not adding timing. You're just kind of keeping a timing value that works and what makes the car happy. But again, folks will ask, well, how much timing are you running? Like, dude, I can't even come close to answering that, because if it's a shitty DA, it's commanding a ton of timing. If it's a great DA, super low DA, it's going to command significantly less. So to answer the question, there is no timing value that you set the thing to. In other words, you don't set a complete row as a timing value. It wouldn't do you any good. It would be if you set it to 20 degrees of timing, it might be great at a low airflow portion of the table, but way too much at the bottom. And if you cut it for the bottom and did the same, be the exact opposite, vice versa type thing. So again, folks will ask, well, how much timing are you running? Well, you have to get real specific. You have to say, okay, on this day in this DA, The airflow was this, so I know that at that airflow, I'm commanding 15 degrees of timing. Or at this airflow, I know that I'm going to be commanding 13.5 degrees of timing. It all depends on airflow. It all depends on density, altitude. That is why corrected numbers can get a little bit weird with Hellcats, because timing values are not going to be consistent. Anyway, this is kind of, I know this is a little bit like murky. It's kind of miring it into some of the details, but I feel like if I can give you guys a better understanding of what's going on behind the curtain, you'll have a better understanding of why, and when I give the advice that I give, where that advice is coming from. It's not coming from a place where, you know, I heard about this from somebody talking about it, or I did research on something. Guys, this is stuff that I've lived. This is stuff that I do regularly with my own car, data logging, things like that, which, by the way, always data log your passes. Don't forget to data log your cars. So let's talk about that for a minute, because, you know, you guys know where I'm coming from with this stuff. This is stuff that I've lived. It's not stuff that I've had to research, or, you know, I heard from a guy. No, I live this stuff. That's where this advice, or that's where these chats come from. It's just my experience, and this is what I've seen, and so I'm bringing that to you. So data logging. If you're new to Hellcat world, this is something that you're going to need to get really good at really quickly. And you don't have to buy credits to data log your car. Just get the HP Tuner software. Only worry about the data logging. Log pretty much everything that you can. But what you're going to be doing is you want to be looking at short-term knock retard. You're going to be looking at injector duty cycle. You're going to be looking at all of these things, because this is going to give you kind of the health of, you know, how's the fuel quality. You know, I noticed that when I get fuel at this Shell station, I never have any knock retard, but if I get fuel at this other Shell station, it's always freaking out. I don't understand. You know, all of these things are going to be really evident when you start getting into data logging. And I'm not saying that you have to. I mean, look, this is starting to get into a level that most guys will never find themselves getting to with their cars. And again, it's just, I don't know, nerds like me, and maybe some of you are the same way. You get kind of into this stuff. You want to know not only what time it is, you want to know how this clock works. This is for the guys that really want to dive into it. Data logging is going to be your new hobby. And dissecting that information becomes real important to some folks. So just if you decide to get into doing that, my only real advice is this. There's only a few things that you really need to look at. I wouldn't go too crazy unless you start getting into tuning and other things, or you're going to be planning on changing the parameters in your tune, which again, you're going to get into unlocking the computer and everything else to get to that point. In this case, I'm just talking about reading the tune out, or not. I'm not talking about reading the tune out. I'm mainly talking about just what you're going to be data logging along the way. Now, still talking about tuning, one thing that I do need to throw out there before I can really wrap up or get to the end of a tuning chat is that anything that you do to your car that involves cracking the ECU will immediately void your warranty. Guys try to get around this by buying a separate computer and tuning the separate computer and leaving their original one stock. Nice try, but unfortunately the manufacturers kind of saw that coming, and there is a fault code that is stored. You won't get a check engine light or anything like that, but is what's known as a P1405 code, P1405. And that is basically, it's a reflash. It's telling the world that there has been some type of a reflash done to the car that is outside of the parameters of a normal Mopar reflash. Basically, it's saying somebody's been in here messing around and we know about it. And once that 1405 pops up, that is the runaway code for any tech. So when they see that, there's a chance that you're going to lose all of your warranty at that point. So just know that coming into the conversation. That's why What I recommend, if you want to do a 309 gear, is put a pedal commander in the car, easy to tuck away, doesn't have anything to do with the computer. But that would be about the extent of the modifications that I would do to a Hellcat if it were my car and I wanted to maintain warranty and all of that. A lot of times they're just not going to see the 309. They're not going to notice that the 309 gear is in there. But even that can void certain portions of your warranty. FCA is pretty funny about how they are very quick to void a warranty, especially when it comes to these cars. So just know that coming into it. And aside from that, the other part of Hellcat ownership is just know that these cars are creepy fast. They're not like modded CTSV fast. They are creepy fast in that you can be doing and cruising at 120 miles an hour and not even notice it. There's no real noise to the thing. It just happens to be traveling at a very high velocity. This platform is incredibly stable. So you just don't notice those types of speeds. So get ready for that. The RPM, if you've got a stock gear, is going to be low. You're not going to notice this thing is really accelerating at the rate that it is. And that's the other thing that I was going to talk about was, what's the ownership experience like? The cool thing about the Hellcat is that you can have a number of vehicles in one. And if anything else, that to me is probably the most fun part about the car. I can go red key if I want to go crazy. I can go black key if I just want to goof off and have fun in a car, or just put the car in 500 horse mode if I'd actually like to remember what having traction was like. So you can do that. And basically, by the way, a Hellcat in 500 horse mode runs kind of like a 392 that's had a stroker kit but is running a stock cam. It's just real torquey down low. The car is just a lot of fun to own and drive. The driving experience is really worth every penny of the cost of admission. So, if you're watching this and you're kind of on the fence about, well, should I get one of these things? You've got a 392. Should I make the switch to the Hellcat? There are some differences with how the cars drive. And that's another thing that I guess I need to talk about. Because again, like I said in the other video before we lost the feed, a lot of these Hellcats are purchased by guys that had 392 cars or 5.7 cars, but a lot of them are 392 owners, are moving from a 392 to a Hellcat. The big difference that you're going to notice stock for stock is the 392 is a snappier car, just driving the thing around. Now, I'm not talking about putting this thing in boost or heavily in boost. Keeping in mind that this car will go to 10 pounds of boost at partial throttle. What I'm getting at is that the 392 is just a snappier, it's a high compression, larger engine. It makes more power down low when this thing's not in boost. And it's just, again, it's a snappy car. You're going to lose a little bit of that going to the Hellcat. Think of it like this. The 392, high compression, stroker, small block, okay? It's got a lot of tip-in throttle response, and it's just a very snappy engine. This one, on the other hand, is going to act like what it is, off boost, a smaller engine with less compression. So that's like double whammy right there, right? That doesn't necessarily have a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde attitude about it, because boost is very progressive with this car. But you've got to be making about 3 or 4 pounds of boost before you're even at the power level of the 392. So you got to know that coming into it. As a matter of fact, your 500 horse mode in the Hellcat is 5 pounds of boost. So again, just know that coming into this. It drives like a large engine. Like it's got a really big engine that just has low compression. It makes a lot of power, and it'll scream, and it'll kind of again, surprise you with the velocity that you're going just because there's no drama to it. But that's part of it. I mean, you're buying 700 horsepower and there's just no real drama to it. It's both a good thing and a bad thing, I suppose. So again, hopefully these videos helped you out. The first one tied in with this one, which is actually kind of a good thing because I went a little bit longer than what I normally would have gone. But excuse me, I'm going to check in with you guys and I'm going to split. Let's see. Cubby said, I love my wide body cat. No, they look great. That's the thing, man. I mean, I don't dislike them. I just, I like the skinny girl a little bit better. Mike's saying exactly. Think if they just widened out the rear fenders and made the super stock a factory staggered setup. Man, if they would just make all of them a factory staggered setup, I just don't flipping understand it. Anyway, that's a story for another day. Meadow X Fox saying can't get Archangel battery for Charlie Scat Pack. Why? Probably because Nick is having a hard time getting his hands, I think, on those batteries. And I know right now, it's kind of pricey. So I would check with Nick, see if he's got any more batteries coming in anytime soon. Anthony's saying, I love my way my wide body Hellcat looks. Agree to disagree. It's not really that's the thing. I don't dislike it. It's a matter of opinion one way or another. But he is right about one thing. The non-flashy colors look better on the wide body. I will agree with that 100%. Kevin McDavid's asking, how safe are stock Hellcats with 100 shot or less of nitrous if you run 100 octane? So I will say this. One of the issues, Ken, that you're going to run into is that the stock air fuel ratio is lean on a Hellcat. It's commanding 12.7 to 1. So I wouldn't just throw a hundo at it. What I would probably do is run a wet shot and run like Sunoco 100 octane in your gas tank as well as in the standalone fuel system. That's what I would do. It's what most guys do with these cars. When they run nitrous, they run a standalone kit and leave it at that. 100 shot in that respect, I would say you're probably going to be okay, although I would prefer to at least throw a colder set of plugs in it. But again, you start to get into the whole, at what point is safe really not safe? I would still like to see it tuned. I would probably want to see about at least a degree taken out of all of the high load sections of your airflow, and hit it with that 100 shot. George is checking in saying, just traded my 392 Scat for an F8 green wide body Charger Hellcat. So happy. Very nice. I like that, George. Good job. Getting back to Ken. Hey, Ken, one thing I'll just say this, man. I never would leave a Hellcat. When I did the nitrous tune, I would always pull at least 2 degrees of timing. So, again, it's a 93 octane versus 100. You can kind of push me, pull you a little bit on that deal. But I wouldn't want to say that it would be safe because I don't know that it would be safe. You start messing with like summertime DAs and things like that when the car is going to command a significant amount of timing. I would still want to try to pull a couple of degrees of timing on it just to maintain that safety margin. Anthony G's checking in saying, congrats. Very nice. Good job, George. I like it. Let's see. Kobe's saying 309 with no tune. I'm going to get one and start data logging. Good idea on that. Just remember, guys, with the 309 gear, one thing I may not have touched on, I may have, because I know I've touched on a lot of things, but if I didn't, I'll touch on it now. Don't be surprised if you take the car to the track that you notice a little bit of a yip on the 1-2. What we call a yip is that it'll go, and it goes to the gears just fine after that. That's predictive shift, having a little bit of a fit with the acceleration, the acceleration rate. Most cars, I knew that I think I did touch on it. I knew that my car was off to a Banshee pass when it would yip on that 1-2 shift. So there's that. There's ways that you cure that in the tune, but if you're just going to be out there playing around with your car, you're really only going to notice a yip when the DA starts to drop fairly significantly. So just something to consider going the 309 gear. But man, I got to tell you, the 309 is definitely worth it for these cars. In fact, I can't believe these things didn't come from the factory with the 309. Let's see. Machine's asking, what would you first look at or replace when getting a used Hellcat? Tires, probably for one. Two, the oil. So at the same time, change the oil. Three, it depends on the mileage, but you know, I'm going to be swapping out a 309 gear pretty quick if it doesn't have one already, which would include the fluids and everything else there as well. But those would be the things that I would probably do just like right off the bat if it were me. Obviously, check out the mileage. God damn, I'm going to kick your ass. Fucking wife got jokes, man. So for you guys that don't know, there's a door right there. And she just decided to come by there and just mess with me. So, yeah. She's going to do it again, too. I can almost promise you. Married life. Am I right? Kevin saying, hey, took your advice and ordered the Sprint booster for better throttle response. Can't wait. You're going to like it. I promise. Machine saying, how can you make a Hellcat snappy? It's real easy. Just keep turning your pedal commander up. Now the thing is that it's not that the Hellcat doesn't have real good throttle response, and it's not that the Hellcat is slow or anything like that. The thing about the Hellcat, especially if you still have the 262 gear, the thing about the Hellcat is that it doesn't ever feel like 700 horsepower. At least it didn't to me. Not what you would think 700 horsepower would feel like, but you put 309 gear, tune, and a couple other things at it, and all of a sudden, this thing feels completely different. And it's a feel thing. And again, it goes back to what I was saying about how smooth the car makes power and how it'll just keep dragging you into higher velocity and higher velocity without really any whimper, you don't even notice it. And that's just how smooth that setup is. So, hey, Racer X is checking in saying, what's going on, buddy? Happy Turkey Day. Happy Turkey Day to you, man. Racer X saying, love me some 309. Better believe it. Anthony's asking, how is a 6-speed with a 309 gear? Nobody will ever really know, man. They're all running 370 gears. And to be honest with you, they really need the 392 gears or a re-gear in the transmission, because first gear in a Hellcat is like 226, 228. It's extremely long. I mean, you're doing 62, 63 miles an hour in first gear. So really with that, you're looking at, I don't know, it's a little bit, I'm not going to say sluggish because it's hardly that, but by comparison with the automatic, it kind of is. But yeah, you're with a 390 gear. It's a little bit of an improvement over the 370, but it's still, in my opinion, I feel like it needs a little bit more. Clutch 392. Everybody's laughing. Everybody thinks that was pretty funny, bud. Let's see. Mike saying, any quick and easy tuneless mod suggestions for us 5.7 guys besides trading it in for a scat pack? Tuneless mod. Look, man. I mean, the same stuff applies to the 5.7. First of all, better tire for sure. Gonna need it. Those cars will light the tires up at will, and that's something that does need to be discussed a little bit in a way. It's like, look, the 5.7 is pretty darn fast, all things considered. I mean, it's not that long ago that a 13-second or a high 12-second car was considered fast. I mean, they're fast, trust me. So throw a better tire on it for sure. cold air kits and things like that really aren't going to do you much good. But the Hellcat filter will, Hellcat lower box, I think in some applications will help you. But, even with that, you don't really need all of that because the stock air filter, it's the same as the one for the 392, by the way, flows just fine for what the 5.7's needs are. So the 5.7's actually got a lot going for it, but it could have a little bit more going for it as well. But I would start with the tire. Mike Horn's asking, hey B, is a full air ride suspension usable for drag racing, or is it not strong enough for a high horsepower Challenger? I've seen guys running the air suspension on the drag strip. Guys, air suspension is what's used in 18-wheelers. I mean, obviously it's not the same bags, but no, it's plenty stout. I wouldn't worry about that. Yeah, the air suspension has been around in 18-wheelers forever. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. The new modern stuff is good. As long as you're running a quality kit, I don't see there being any real issues. Let's see. Oh, some Ferrari guy saying cashed in on some Black Friday deals. Very nice. New ported 19 intake manifold for my 1550. Can't wait to make some power up to 7,500 and let her eat. I like it. Mike G saying, yeah, I switched to extreme contact tires and Hellcat airbox and blew away the previous best 0 to 60 by about a third of a second. Just curious, what else could I squeeze out before getting into tunes? Not a whole lot, man. I mean, you can start looking at, exhaust at that point. Obviously a full, 6.4 / Hellcat kit could help you there as well. Make a little bit more power, be a little bit lighter in the process. So there's that to consider. Kind of a budget way to go about it, but again, a budget, I mean, still relatively expensive. But aside from that, not a lot. I mean, you're basically coming up on the limits of what you can really get away with. I mean, a ported intake manifold could certainly help, depending on how much casting flash and other funkery is in that manifold. And the manifolds that I've been porting lately, they've been in pretty funky shape. I don't know if it's just luck of the draw or whatever, but definitely some curious things with some of the manifolds that I've seen too. But, a larger manifold with like an 84 and 85 millimeter throttle body, that can definitely help in terms of throttle response and making a little bit better mid-range and upper end power, as well as some torque too. Depends on the shape of the manifold, but man, like I said, lately some of the ones that I've seen have been pretty jacked up. Decent amount of core shift. To be honest with you, the last 5.7 car manifold that I did was a car manifold that took me the longest out of any of the car manifolds I've ever had to work on. And it just getting everything right again, because the core shift, it was shifted like the top, from your point of view, there's two different sides to this. The top was shifted to the driver's side. And so the runners had some funkiness going on, just some weird. Anyway, I had to go in and carve a bunch of material out of that thing, and it's going to flow great. It's going to work great. It's just I had to do more work to it than normal. But all that being said, obviously, that along with, maybe that exhaust system would probably be pretty good. And then after that, you're definitely going to be looking at tunes for sure. Reject saying just installed a throttle body spacer on his 5.7 Challenger. I've never wasted $135 like that before. Yeah, that's pretty much how I would see it too. Some Ferrari guy saying, now I need headers so I can put my buddy's stock scat to bed. Be surprised how much you can freak out a 392 owner with a 5.7. It can be done. We do it all the time at Doc Differential. Machine saying, all right, so more ponies to make a Hellcat more dramatic. Actually, the 309 gear and a pedal commander will wake it up sufficiently. I think that would be, to be honest with you guys, again, and my Hellcat 101 was really more, and I'll do some, you know, we can get into the 392 side of it as well, but I'm going to do a standalone video for this. Really focusing more for the first-time Hellcat owners, but knowing what I know now and seeing the gains and everything else that I was able to get with my car before I unlocked the computer, I can tell you that the smart money on a Hellcat is 309 gear, pedal commander, drag pack, wheel and tire setup, maybe some weight reduction, and that's it. That's all you'll need. And just know that it might yip on the 1-2 shift, but it's not hurting anything. It's just the computer pulling power and then feeding it back in. But those are the things that work so well and make the Hellcat just a joy to drive. That I really wouldn't take it much farther than that until you're ready to really start looking at significant weight reduction. Obviously, the tuning, the transmission tuning, and everything else. All of that is going to need to come into play at that point. So, you know, the starter kit, 309 and a pedal commander. From there, it's going to be sell the pedal commander, get the ECU unlocked, and start getting ready to do transmission tuning. But if the car's fast enough and you're stoked with it with just the pedal commander and the 309 gear, that's a real fun place to be. That's like the fun zone for a Hellcat. So anyway, just my own advice from my own experience. Reject saying, what do I need to modify to be able to walk a stock 392? Cam, ported intake, larger throttle body, long tube headers, scat pack exhaust system, and well, cam, maybe even injectors. I probably won't need injectors, but anyway, that's what you're going to need to be able to run with or to scare a 392. That's what you're going to need. May even need a gear with that, but you'll certainly be in the in their neck of the woods for sure, especially if you've got a 309 gear. 262 gear cars won't be though. You'll definitely need to swap gears. Let's see. Some Ferrari guys saying with my 5.0, no 5.7 here. I have 309 axle in, it's 5.7. Yeah, as long as it's a track lock or positive traction unit, you should be fine. Part of the super track pack. Ooh, nice. Estimated cost, significant. And that's when you got to start looking at, do you want to go cam 5.7 or do you want to go stock 392? But I don't want to speak out of turn because, costs may have varied since I was at the shop, but you're not going to walk out for any less than about $6,000 for everything all in. Maybe even more than that once you start factoring in labor. But if you're doing cam, then you can do headers at the same time, and you probably won't get charged extra labor, because the heads have to come off to do the cam. So, well, let me rephrase that. To do the lifters, the cam, the push rods, and everything else, yeah, all of that's got to come out. The heads do have to come off. Boosted me saying my Hellcat has a 309 pulley tune, drag pack, pedal commander, and makes 783 wheel horsepower. Very different throttle response than stock, I would say. Let's see. I'd say it's very different. Lots of fun too. Reject the narrative saying the 309 is awesome. Any RTs with 262 loses every time. Yeah, I would imagine so. And with that, guys, I'm going to bail on this. I know we had on our first part 1 of the Hellcat chat, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty. I do apologize for that, but coming back around, was able to get in an extra hour. So it looks like we got a little bit of extra time in on this one. So at any rate, I hope you guys have a fantastic Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to each and every one of you. And I will catch you guys on the next one. And with that, we're going to call that a wrap. Y'all have a great one. Adios.